Let us in.
Forget the haunted castles, the ancient curses, and the old ghost stories whispered by candlelight. The most unsettling legends of our time were born not in dusty books or ancient tombs, but in the glow of a computer screen. The story of the black-eyed children is one of them. It's a story that doesn't belong to a forgotten century or a distant village. It's digital folklore. It crawled out of the early internet, spread through message boards, and grew in the quiet corners of forums where truth and fiction blur. And unlike other monsters, this one doesn't hide in the woods or haunt graveyards. It comes to your door, it knocks, and it asks to be let in. The first known reports of these eerie encounters appeared in the late 1990s, around the time when people were still exploring what the internet could be. Early online communities, places like alt.folklore.ghoststories or creepypasta boards, were filled with strange experiences and half-true confessions. In one of those threads, a man claimed that two children with completely black eyes approached his car one night in Texas. They asked for a ride home. They didn't shout or beg. They spoke politely, almost too calmly, but their tone carried something that felt wrong. He described feeling a sense of dread. He couldn't explain a primal warning, deep in his gut telling him that something was not human about them. When he refused, their expressions turned cold, their voices flat. "We can't come in unless you invite us," one of them said. That detailed the need for an invitation has since become a central part of the legend. It's what makes the story so invasive, so personal. Vampires in ancient myths needed permission to enter your home. Demons in Christian lore could only cross your threshold if you allowed them to. But this was different. These weren't demons wearing old-world clothing or vampires dressed in Gothic elegance. These were children. They looked like your neighbor's kids, the ones who might knock to sell cookies or ask to borrow a phone. Only their eyes betrayed them black, bottomless, like polished stones that reflected nothing. People described encounters that started with an ordinary sound, a knock on the door, a tap on the window, a voice calling softly from the dark. The children always had a reason to be there. They said they were lost, they needed to use the phone. They were waiting for their parents. They had the right words, but no matter how convincing their story sounded, the fear that crept in was undeniable. Witnesses often said the air felt heavy, the world seemed to hold its breath. Even before noticing the eyes, they knew something was deeply wrong. The detail of their eyes came later in the encounter. Victims often reported that the realization didn't hit them immediately. They might start speaking to the children through the door or the car window, trying to be polite, but when they finally looked closer, they saw it two perfect circles of black, where no whites or pupils should be. It wasn't just eerie. It was unnatural. The human brain is wired to recognize faces, to read eyes for emotion, threat, or safety. When that recognition fails, when the eyes reveal nothing, it triggers pure fear. It's the same reason dolls, mannequins, and masks can unsettle Usbe, because they mimic humanity without truly being human. The black-eyed children are that fear made flesh. The first-hand accounts that followed the original story appeared everywhere: emails, blogs, message boards, YouTube channels. The format became familiar. A quiet night, a sudden knock, polite voices outside asking to come in. The storyteller always described feeling torn between compassion and terror. Something in their instincts screamed no, but another part, the social part, the human part, hesitated. After all, what kind of person refuses to help a child? That internal conflict became the emotional core of the legend. The black-eyed children don't just scare you, they test you. They weaponize your empathy. Consider one of the most shared accounts. A man sitting in his living room late one evening reading when he heard knocking on his front door. He opened it slightly and saw two children, a boy and a girl, standing under the porch light. Their heads were bowed, their voices polite but flat. They said they were cold, that they needed to call their mother. The man felt uneasy but didn't know why. Then he noticed that their eyes were completely black. His hand froze on the doorknob. The girl said again, "Please, sir, we can't come in unless you invite us." Something in her tone sent a shiver down his spine. He slammed the door, locked it, and turned off every light. When he looked through the peephole moments later, the porch was empty. Encounters like that one became a sort of modern campfire tale, but instead of being passed through whispers around flames, they spread through screens. Yet what makes the story so enduring isn't just the fear of the unknown, it's how close it feels to reality. It happens in places we all recognize: our cars, our porches, our doorsteps. There are no ancient rituals, no lost villages, no cursed forests. It's suburbia. It's the street you live on, and that's what makes it believable. The story fits perfectly into modern life, into the spaces where technology connects us and isolates us at the same time. The rise of the internet gave birth to a new kind of folklore, one that didn't need centuries to evolve. Myths used to take generations to form, growing through oral storytelling and regional variations. But digital myths spread instantly. They mutate through reposts and retellings, absorbing each person's imagination. The Black-Eyed Children are a perfect example of that process. No single author owns the story. It belongs to the internet. To the thousands who've added their own details, the sound of static when they speak, the sudden cold that fills the air, the way animals refuse to go near them. Each version adds something new, keeping the legend alive. Skeptics often dismiss the phenomenon as mass hysteria, psychological suggestion, or internet fiction gone viral. And maybe they're right. But folklore has always been less about proving truth and more about reflecting fear. The legend of the Black-Eyed Children taps into something primal: the fear of being tricked by innocence, the dread of opening your door to something that looks human but isn't. It's the nightmare of trust betrayed. The reminder that danger doesn't always roar or growl. Sometimes it knocks politely and waits for your permission. People who've claimed to encounter the children often describe lingering aphrodixy nightmares, paranoia, and an irrational fear of knocks at the door. Some say electronics malfunctioned afterward, lights flickered, or pets became aggressive. A few even claim to have fallen ill in the days that followed, as if something had attached itself to them through fear alone. These aftershocks mirror traditional accounts of supernatural encounters in older cultures. In old folklore, meeting a spirit or demon often left a mark, not physical, but psychological or spiritual. The Black-Eyed Children follow the same pattern, updated for a digital age. What's even more chilling is that these encounters don't always happen at night. Some witnesses describe seeing them in broad daylight outside stores, near rest stops, or standing beside deserted highways. The daylight doesn't make them less frightening. In fact, it makes them worse. It strips away the excuse of imagination. You can't blame the dark when the sun is out. And yet, even then, something about these beings seems to bend reality. Witnesses say people nearby don't notice them, that they feel isolated in their fear, as if the rest of the world can see what's standing right in front of them. Whether the Black-Eyed Children are supernatural entities, psychological projections, or modern myth doesn't really matter in the end. What matters is how the story makes people feel the unease that lingers when you hear a knock after midnight. The hesitation before answering, the tiny whisper in your mind that says, "What if it's them?" Every era has its monsters. For the digital age, the monsters wear the faces of children and wait for an invitation. So the next time you hear a gentle knock on your door after dark, think twice before opening it. Look through the peephole, check the shadows, and if you see eyes that reflect nothing, close the door. Don't argue, don't ask questions. Just remember the words that echo across every version of this tale. We can come in unless you let us. And if stories like this leave you questioning what's real and what's waiting in the dark, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to Belmoze, where modern myths, real fears, and ancient shadows all meet under the same light. It always begins with that simple, polite request. A knock on the door, a soft voice, "Can we come in?" That's it. No screaming, no growling, no monstrous roar. Just a calm human voice asking for permission to enter. But behind that request lies something far more chilling than any ghost story or demonic legend. The Black-Eyed Children never force their way in. They wait, they ask, and they depend on you to break the barrier of safety yourself. This is what makes their encounters so deeply disturbing. The monster doesn't invade your home, it waits for you to invite it. It places the act of doom in your hands. In countless accounts from across the internet, this single rule never changes. They can't enter unless they're granted permission. It's a consistent pattern, almost ritualistic. People report feeling pressured to comply, as if hypnotized by politeness or guilt. There's something ancient and universal about this fear, the idea that once you let something dark inside, you can never make it leave. Imagine this. It's late at night, you're home alone, The lights are low. Maybe you're scrolling through your phone or watching TV. Then comes the sound of steady knock. Not urgent, not frantic, but rhythmic, calm, and deliberate. You open the door, just a crack, and there they are, 2 children. They look ordinary at first glance, dressed normally, their expressions neutral. One might be a boy in a hoodie, the other a small girl with long hair. They tell you they're lost, or that their parents forgot them, or that they need to use your phone. The stories are always familiar, almost rehearsed, but there's something about their tantu even, to controlled, that freezes the air. Then you feel it, the creeping dread in your chest. You can't explain it, but every instinct tells you not to let them in. Still, they keep talking, pressing politely, their voices steady and unhurried. Please, we just need to come inside for a moment. Their words are perfectly normal, but the way they say them isn't. It's flat, emotionless, like a recording being played back. It's at that moment, maybe when the porch light catches their faces just right, that you notice the eyes. Black, completely black. No whites, no pupils, just darkness. That's when most stories end with the same reaction. Pure panic. The person slams the door, locks it, sometimes hides in another room. Later, when they check again, the children are gone. No sound of footsteps, no sign they were ever there. Just silence. This rule the invitation is the detail that transforms the black-eyed children legend from just another ghost story into something far deeper. It turns the horror inward, forcing us to confront the fragile line between safety and danger. In old folklore, vampires needed permission to enter a home because the threshold represented sacred protection. The home was the last bastion of safety against the chaos outside. The black-eyed children carry that same symbolism into the modern world. In a society where we constantly invite strangers into our lives through screens, links, and messages, this myth feels like a haunting metaphor for what happens when we lower our guard. Every encounter follows the same eerie emotional pattern. At first, the person feels empathy. After all, who wouldn't help a lost child? It's dark, cold, maybe raining. The social instinct kicks in. But then the fear comes, not rational fear, but instinctive, primal. Many witnesses say that dread feels unnatural, as if the body recognizes danger before the mind does. That emotional battle between compassion and terror is what makes these encounters so effective. It's not about the creature forcing its way in it, it's about convincing you to open the door yourself. In one well-documented account from Vermont, a husband and wife were woken late at night by a knock. Standing at the door were 2 children, a boy and a girl, saying their parents would be there soon and asking to wait inside. The couple hesitated, but after a few moments of awkward silence, they let them in. The children sat quietly on the couch, heads bowed, speaking in short, flat sentences. When the wife brought them drinks, she noticed their eyes completely black. Before she could react, her husband began to nosebleed, and the power went out. The children stood and said in unison, "Our parents are here now." They left, walking into the dark where 2 tall figures waited by the road. The couple never saw them again. Days later, the husband was diagnosed with an aggressive illness. Whether the story is true or not, it captures the essence of the legend, the irreversible consequence of invitation. Once the barrier is broken, once the words come in are spoken, something changes. The safety of the home dissolves. You've given permission for something unnatural to cross into your world, and that's what makes it terrifying. It's not the creature's power, but yours. Psychologists who've examined this folklore often connect it to an ancient archetype, the threshold test. Across cultures, there are countless myths warning that danger only comes when we allow it. From European vampire tales to Japanese Waikai stories, the act of invitation represents surrender. The black-eyed children carry that same idea into the digital age, where boundaries between public and private life have become blurred. Your front door, once the clear line between safety and threat, now mirrors the virtual doors we open every day. Every click, every message. Every stranger online asking for access echoes the same warning. Once you open the door, you can't always close it again. But beyond symbolism, what truly unsettles people is how calm the encounters are. There's no violence, no overt threat. The fear grows not from what the children do, but from what they don't. They never break character, never get angry. They simply persist, politely, endlessly asking to be let in. That subtle persistence makes them more frightening than any monster that attacks outright. They turn something ordinary children asking for help into something suffocatingly wrong. People who've experienced it say the hardest part is the silence afterward. The knocking stops, the voices fade, but the fear lingers. For nights afterward, they keep hearing phantom knocks or faint whispers at the edge of sleep. Some claim the phrase "let us in" repeats in their heads for days, as if the invitation was never fully withdrawn. The idea that something could still be waiting outside, patient and polite, is enough to keep lights on and doors locked long after the encounter ends. The detail that they can't enter without permission also raises uncomfortable moral questions. What happens if you do let them in? Some stories claim those who do vanish or become sick or experience strange electrical disturbances in their homes. Others say they wake up hours later with no memory of what happened after opening the door. The few supposed survivor stories all share the same regret. They describe a feeling of being watched long after the encounter, of seeing the same black eyes in reflections or dreams. The legend docenti just prey on our fear of the supernatural, it preys on our sense of responsibility. We're taught to protect children, to trust innocence. The black-eyed children twist that instinct into something sinister. They take something good compassion and weaponize it. They remind us that evil doesn't always come with claws or fangs. Sometimes it smiles politely and waits for your permission. And maybe that's why this legend refuses to die. It's not bound to any one place or era. It lives in every story about strangers at the door. In every uneasy moment, when you feel something staring from the dark outside your window, the simple phrase "let us in" echoes through centuries of fear, from medieval vampire tales to modern suburban anxieties. It's a phrase that makes you question your own choices, your own boundaries. So when the knocking comes late at night and the voices sound too calm, too polite, remember this: they cannot come in unless you allow them. And that's the most horrifying truth of all. The danger isn't outside, it's in your decision to open the door. There's a strange pattern that follows every story of the black-eyed children. It's not just the fear, not just the uneasy feeling that stays behind. It's what comes after. Something always seems to go wrong in the days or weeks that follow an accident, a sudden illness, a death in the family, or some disaster that seems to shadow the encounter. That's why so many people have come to see the black-eyed children not as ghosts or demons, but as harbingers, omens of doom that appear to announce that something terrible is about to happen. They don't cause the misfortune directly. They simply arrive, and soon after, the world of the witness begins to unravel. In old folklore, there were always signs before tragedy struck: ravens circling over homes, dogs howling through the night, candles that refused to stay. Lateach was taken as a warning that death or disaster was near. The black-eyed children fit perfectly into that ancient pattern. They show up without explanation, never staying long, always leaving behind an atmosphere thick with dread. People who encounter them describe a sense that something irreversible has been set in motion, as if the meeting itself opened a door that cannot be closed. One woman from Oklahoma told her story on a late-night radio show. She said that 2 weeks before her husband's fatal car crash, she heard knocking late one night. When she opened the door, she found 2 children standing in the rain. They looked lost and asked to come inside. She almost agreed, but then noticed their eyes completely black. She slammed the door shut, terrified. The next morning, she brushed it off as a nightmare. But 2 weeks later, her husband's truck veered off a bridge on his way to work. She said the first thought that came to her when she got the call wasn't the accidented, was those eyes staring up at her porch light. It's stories like this that shape the idea of the black-eyed children as messengers, or perhaps observers, of tragedy. They appear before events that bring chaos or death, as if drawn to human suffering. Some say they feed on fear. Others believe they're scouts sent ahead of something larger, something that still hides behind the edge of human understanding. But one thing is consistent across the stories. Once you see them, life doesn't go back to normal. Many witnesses describe lingering symptoms after their encounters: headaches that won't fade, nausea, nightmares, a strange static charge in the air that seems to follow them from room to room. It's as if the presence of the children leaves a residue, an invisible sickness that slowly drains their energy. Doctors find nothing wrong, yet the victims insist they can feel something inside them shifting, something dark and heavy. Whether psychological or supernatural, that sense of contamination adds to the legend's power. The fear doesn't end when the children vanish. It begins there. Take the story of a retired police officer from Texas. He was known among his neighbors for being rational, practical, and skeptical of anything paranormal. One night, he was called to investigate a report of kids wandering the neighborhood past midnight. When he found them standing near an old playground, he said they seemed strangely calm. They told him their parents were coming to pick them up, and when he asked for their names, they only smiled. That's when he noticed their eyes completely black. He said his flashlight flickered, and a wave of nausea hit him so hard he almost dropped it. He turned to call for backup, and when he looked again, they were gone. The next day, the officer started feeling ill. Within weeks, he developed heart complications and had to retire early. He told the story years later, saying that he didn't believe they attacked him directly, but he was sure their presence was connected to what came after. He described them as a warning that something bad was on the horizon. This theme of warning of doom approaching echoes through countless reports. It's what sets the black-eyed children apart from other paranormal tales. Ghosts haunt specific places. Demons possess, but these beings don't linger. They appear briefly, deliver a silent message through their very presence, and disappear. They don't want conversation. They don't chase or attack. Their power lies in what follows. Some researchers link the black-eyed children to older stories of the psychopomp, a being whose job is to escort souls to the other side. In Greek mythology, Hermes carried this role. In Celtic tales, it was the banshee whose cry foretold a family member's death. In every culture, there are figures that appear before catastrophe, not to cause it, but to signal that fate is already decided. The black-eyed children might be the modern face of that same ancient figure cold, emotionless, watching humanity from the shadows. In today's age, where superstition has faded and science dominates, the idea of omens feels out of place. Yet when people face something they can't explain, they fall back on ancient instincts. The sudden appearance of a pair of children with all black eyes doesn't fit into any normal framework. It feels like a message, a warning in physical form. It's as if they are reminding us that not everything can be measured, not every shadow can be understood. One of the strangest details repeated in these encounters is the sudden malfunction of electronic devices. Lights flicker, phones lose signal, and car engines stall. These moments often happen right before or during the sighting. Some interpret this as an electromagnetic disturbance caused by whatever energy the beings carry. Others believe it's symbolic that the world itself reacts to their presence, that nature bends briefly under their weight. When the air hums and static fills the silence, the witness senses that something unnatural is near. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, subtle, but undeniable. Their essay case from the early 2000s, where a man driving through rural Montana stopped when he saw a small figure on the roadside. He thought it was a lost child, standing motionless in the dark. As he pulled over and rolled down his window, the figure turned its head toward him, and he saw the black eyes. He panicked, hit the gas, and drove home without looking back. That night, he had vivid dreams of standing in the same spot, the child staring at him. 2 days later, his house caught fire due to a wiring fault. He and his wife escaped, but the timing burned the image of those eyes into his memory. Skeptics argue that these stories are coincidences, that people link unrelated misfortunes to the fear they felt. But to those who've seen them, coincidence doesn't explain the intensity of the dread that follows. It doesn't explain the unshakable sense that something dark has marked them. When fear feels that specific and that lasting logic becomes hard to trust, some believers suggest that the black-eyed children could be a form of energy manifestation beings that appear where negative events are about to happen, feeding off the emotion before and after it occurs. They don't choose victims. They're drawn to the energy that surrounds chaos and death. That theory would explain their emotionless calm, their patient stares, and their disappearance the moment the encounter ends. They're not there to harm, they're there to witness. But if that's true, then their presence becomes even more unsettling, because it means that when they appear, something terrible is already set to unfold. They're not bringing the darkness there because it's already coming. Like carrion birds circling the battlefield before the first arrow flies, they are part of a cycle older than human memory. There's something uniquely human about trying to find meaning in terror. We see patterns where none exist, but sometimes those patterns point to something deeper. The legend of the black-eyed children endures because it captures that dread perfectly. The feeling that the universe sometimes whispers before it screams. A knock on the door, a pair of black eyes. a polite request, and then silence followed by tragedy. Every report, every whisper about them leaves behind the same question that no one can answer. Are they warning us, or simply watching what's already written? Either way, when they appear, the air grows heavy, the world seems smaller, and the sense of safety we cling to begins to crumble. The black-eyed children don't chase or attack. They don't have to. They stand as witnesses to what comes next, harbingers of doom who never speak the warning aloud. There's something ancient buried inside the story of the black-eyed children, something that doesn't belong to the digital age at all. Hidden beneath the surface of this modern legend is an older set of rules, the same ones that governed the vampires of medieval folklore. The connection isn't just thematic, it's precise. The black-eyed children, like the vampires of old, cannot enter a home unless they are invited. This detail might seem small, but it's the most chilling part of the story, because it means that the horror isn't just outside your door, it's waiting for you to let it in. In vampire lore, the invitation rule has always represented more than physical permission. It's a psychological test. It asks how far a human being can go before instinct overrides reason. Vampires, like these children, disguise their danger and familiarity. They look human. They speak politely. They ask for help. Their entire existence depends on your willingness to trust what feels safe. Once that trust is given, the harm begins not by force, but by your own consent. That's what makes the black-eyed children such a terrifying symbol. They don't break into your life. They wait for you to open the door. Every story begins the same way: a knock, a request, and a moment of hesitation. The witness feels something is wrong, but they can't explain why. The children's tone is calm, their faces expressionless. Their eyes are hidden beneath the brim of a hoodie or a shadow cast by a porch light. They speak in simple human phrases. Can we come in? We need to call our parents. And still, that voice in the back of your mind screams no. That is the ancient rule resurfacing, an instinct as old as humanity itself. The one that recognizes danger even when it wears a human face. Folklorists have long argued that these invitation-based entities, vampires, fairies, spirits, symbolize the boundaries between the safe and the unsafe, the known and the unknown. A home represents safety, warmth, and the control we have over our world. The moment we invite something unnatural inside, we blur that line. The black-eyed children are the modern embodiment of that threshold. They appear at the edge of light and dark porch steps, car doors, motel lobbies, places where choice still exists. The power is never taken from the victim. It's offered up willingly or by mistake. Think of what that means in a modern setting. A knock at the door used to mean a neighbor, a delivery, or a lost traveler. Now it's a test of perception. Do you trust the face that looks human? Do you listen to the words that sound harmless? Or do you trust your gut, that ancient voice whispering that something about them isn't right? That is why the invitation rule is so disturbing. It makes every encounter a psychological trap. Take, for example, a documented account from Vermont in 2013. A man living alone during a snowstorm heard gentle knocking on his door just after midnight. He opened it to find two children, a boy and a girl, no older than 10. They said their parents had been in a car accident down the road and asked to come inside to wait. The man felt immediate unease, but also guilt. How could he leave children out in the cold? Still, he couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. Their voices were flat. Their words sounded rehearsed. When he finally looked closer, he saw their eyes. He slammed the door shut. For several minutes, they kept knocking softly, repeating the same words over and over. Then silence. The next morning, there were no footprints in the snow. If he had let them in, what would have happened? No one knows. But according to the legend, once the invitation is given, the children no longer need to ask. That act of consent gives them access not just to your home, but to you. Some say it allows them to drain energy, to manipulate the mind, or to mark the person for something that comes later. Others think it's metaphorical, a symbol for how evil often depends on permission. Either way, it transforms the encounter from a ghost story into a moral one. In older vampire tales, the act of invitation often represented spiritual weakness. The person who opened the door did so because of pride, loneliness, or curiosity flaws that the creature exploited. The black-eyed children work the same way. They prey on empathy and guilt, knowing exactly what tone, what posture, what innocent phrase to use. Their appearance as children isn't random, it's the perfect disguise. It disarms the mind, makes refusal feel cruel. That's the brilliance of the rule. You're not forced to invite them in. You're manipulated into doing it yourself. A researcher once compared the black-eyed children to what he called permission-based predators. In folklore, these are entities that cannot act until the victim grants access. They appear harmless, sometimes even needy, and their entire strategy revolves around your sense of morality. In this light, the children become more than monsters. They become mirrors. They reflect the tension between compassion and survival, between doing what feels right and what feels safe. Some witnesses have described how the moment they refused entry, the children's entire demeanor shifted. The polite tone vanished, replaced by cold silence or anger. One man claimed the children began pounding on his door after he said no, their faces blank, their voices repeating the same line over and over. "Let us in. We can't come in unless you let us." It's the repetition that haunts people the most, as if the words themselves hold a ritual power. The refusal breaks the spell, and they fade away, but the fear lingers. It's no coincidence that this same motif exists across centuries of human storytelling. In Christian folklore, demons can't possess you without consent. In fairy lore, you must accept an offering or invitation to be trapped in their realm. In vampire tales, the creature waits outside the window until the human says yes. The black-eyed children are the newest version of that ancient pattern, carried into the age of porch cameras and motion lights. They represent the same psychological boundary, one that technology can't protect you from. What makes the idea even more unnerving is that this rule forces responsibility onto the victim. The terror isn't random, it's chosen. The children can only harm you if you invite them in. That twist is what elevates the legend from supernatural fear to existential dread. It suggests that evil doesn't invade, it persuades. It waits patiently for a moment of weakness. For the second you doubt yourself, imagine standing by your window late at night, hearing the knock, and seeing two figures below. You feel pity first, then confusion, then dread. You tell yourself it's fine, you start to reach for the lock. That single action, that one gesture, is the entire story condensed into a heartbeat. The choice is yours, but the price might not be. That S, the essence of the vampire, S ruled the belief that destruction begins with an open door. And maybe that's why the legend refuses to die. In every era, humanity invents a new version of the same monster. What changes isn't the creature, it's the disguise. The vampire once wore fangs and a cloak. Now it wears the face of a lost child. Both wait patiently at the edge of safety, knowing that the real horror doesn't live in them, it lives in the moment we decide to trust what shouldn't be trusted. So when the black-eyed children knock, when they ask to be let in, the test isn't theirs, it's yours. They don't break down doors or force entry. They don't need to. All they need is a single word, yes. And in that instant, the old rule of the vampire lives again, as timeless and terrifying as it ever was. There's a particular kind of fear that doesn't come from blood or violence, it comes from recognition. The fear that something looks human but isn't. That's the power of the black-eyed children. They don't frighten us because they're monstrous in appearance. They frighten us because they almost pass as normal. Their faces, their voices, their behavior, it's all close enough to human that the brain struggles to make sense of it. That's where the real horror begins. It's not about the supernatural, it's about the moment when your instincts tell you something is wrong, even when your eyes can't explain why. This fear of the unknown other is ancient. It's the same unease that makes us uncomfortable when a doll's face seems too lifelike, or when a person's expression doesn't match their tone. Psychologists call it the uncanny valley, the point where something resembles humanity, but not perfectly. The black-eyed children sit deep inside that valley. Their black, featureless eyes destroy the illusion of personhood, revealing something hollow beneath. When you see them, the primal part of your mind doesn't register child, it registers predator. That's what makes the legend so enduring in our modern world. It speaks directly to a kind of social paranoia that has only grown in the digital age. We're surrounded by things that look human, AI voices, online avatars, deepfakes, but may not actually be human at all. The black-eyed children fit perfectly into this new landscape of fear. They represent that anxiety that what feels safe and familiar can still be a mask. Imagine scrolling through your social media feed. Every day, you see faces, read messages, watch videos, but you never really know who's behind them. That's the same psychological tension that fuels the Beck legend. These children knock on doors, speak politely, act vulnerable, and yet something feels off. They're not strangers from the outside world, they're distorted reflections of us. The horror comes not from invasion, but from imitation. The first major reports of the black-eyed children surfaced online in the late 1990s, right as the internet was beginning to connect people globally. Message boards like Creepy Encounters and Paranormal World were filled with users sharing experiences that all followed the same pattern: the knock, the request, the dread. Each story felt eerily personal, as if the author was confessing something that had really happened. Whether or not these accounts were fabricated didn't matter. The fear spread. Readers weren't just consuming a story, they were participating in it. The black-eyed children became the first true viral horror of the internet era. That's what separates them from older legends like vampires or ghosts. Those creatures belong to physical places, graveyards, foggy forests. The black-eyed children belong to the digital realm, where stories travel faster than reason. Every repost, every retelling, strengthens the illusion that they're real. They thrive on attention, on our willingness to share. In a sense, we become their messengers, keeping the door open for them in the only place that matters. Now, the collective imagination. But there's another layer beneath the fear. The idea of the other has always reflected society's deeper anxieties. In older times, it was about outsiders, foreigners, witches, or people who didn't belong to the tribe. In modern times, the other has shifted to something more abstract: technology, media, artificial intelligence, things that seem to understand us but don't. The black-eyed children embody that tension perfectly. They mimic humanity the way an algorithm mimics conversation. They know what to say to gain trust, but there's no emotion behind it, no soul. Their eyes, black and empty, are the ultimate symbol of that absence. Their S, something unsettlingly symbolic about the idea of a knock at the door in the digital age. Once, that sound meant a visitor, someone you knew, or a stranger from the outside world. Now, the door is virtual. Every click, every message, every link could be an entry point for something unknown. When the black-eyed children asked to be let in, they re-knocked just knocking on wooden doors, they re-knocking on the psychological ones we keep closed to stay sane. They're asking for permission to enter your head, your feed, your fears. In countless accounts, witnesses describe how the encounter doesn't end when the children leave. They report weeks of paranoia, nausea, nightmares, or a sense of being watched. Even skeptics who don't believe in the supernatural find the idea hard to shake. It sticks because it feels possible. The Beck legend is designed to fit seamlessly into ordinary life. No dark rituals, no ancient curses, just a knock, a conversation, and a moment of doubt. That's all it takes to turn safety into fear. What's fascinating is how this legend mirrors the structure of the internet itself. It spreads invisibly, moves through stories, adapts to new formats. On forums, it was text. On YouTube, it became reenactments. On TikTok, it turned into short, glitchy clips of supposed sightings. The black-eyed children evolve with each generation of technology, always adjusting to the new way we communicate fear. They are, in a sense, the perfect modern monster, faceless, viral, and endlessly replicated. Even their design is clever. The black eyes are simple, but deeply effective. They erase individuality. They strip away everything that makes someone relatably emotion, empathy, warmth. You can't tell if they're angry, or sad, or lying. They're just nothing. That nothingness becomes the canvas for the viewer's imagination, and the human mind fills that void with its own worst fears. The result is a legend that feels both supernatural and psychological, ancient and modern at once. And maybe that's why the Beck myth has lasted this long. It reflects the quiet dread of living in a world where you can never be sure what's real, where the familiar might hide danger and the harmless might conceal horror. Every time someone reads one of those stories, part of them wonders, what if it happened to me? What would I do if I heard that knock, saw those eyes, and heard that voice asking to come in? That thought alone is enough to plant the fear deep in the mind. The black-eyed children are not just a ghost story, they're a digital reflection of our collective uncertainty. In them, we see our fear of losing control, of trusting the wrong face, of being deceived by the things we've created to connect us. They are the embodiment of modern isolation, human on the surface, hollow underneath. So if you ever hear that knock late at night, and a small voice on the other side asks softly, "Can we come in?" Remember what that question really means. It's not just about a door. It's about the boundary between what's human and what isn't, between safety and surrender, between truth and the unknown. And if you've enjoyed uncovering the unsettling truth behind this modern legend, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Belmoze, where we explore the stories that remind us that fear doesn't fade, it just changes shape. This was the fifth and final part of the Black-Eyed Children series.